We all know that sequels are notorious for not quite living up to the first book that they follow. And so, as someone who absolutely loved First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, I was eager, fiending to get my hands on And Now Back to You and to see if it lived up to the hype or if it unfortunately lived up to the curse. Let's talk about my thoughts on And Now Back to You. So, if you don't know, And Now Back to You is the second book in the Heartstring series, and this book follows Jackson and Delilah. Jackson and Delilah are both weather reporters. Jackson works at the radio show with Aiden from the first book, and Delilah works on TV at the network across the street. We are introduced to them in the first book as being annoyed with each other. Jackson is kind of constantly irritated with Delilah because she's doing things like parking horribly and parking, halfway into his usual spot and spilling like pudding all over his shirt. Our book starts off with Jackson and Delilah, and they are brought together to be joint weather reporters for this massive snowstorm that is coming into Maryland. And so the two of them are going to report together. They're going to go to this little cabin and they're going to report on ground zero for the snowstorm. Now, when we get to this place, what we start to see is that annoyance starts to become intrigue. And wouldn't you know it, a relationship begins to blossom. So let's talk about my thoughts on the book and how I feel that it may be compared to the first book. So if you don't know, I read First Time Caller probably about 2 weeks ago, and I absolutely loved it. I rated that book 5 stars. I thought it was exceptionally charming. I thought it was full of depth, and I thought the relationship was really well developed, and the characters were both really complex and well developed and lovable. And so I was really looking forward to this book, especially because I really liked Jackson in the first book. I thought he was a really fun character. He was really interesting and he had a lot of potential. Now, I ended up rating this book, I think 3.75 stars. And I'll tell you why this was, in my opinion, not as strong as First Time Caller. First things first is probably more of a personal thing versus the storytelling itself. But one of my biggest pet peeves in literature is the manic pixie dream girl trope. I find that so irritating for some reason. I genuinely don't know why, but it just feels really annoying and unserious to me. And I felt like what we had was Delilah as a manic pixie dream girl. I found connecting with Delilah to be really difficult. I did not connect with her until the last, I think, 150 pages or so. And for a 450-page book, I'm not connecting with the female main character for the majority of the book. And I feel like she, at the beginning, was very over the top with this like whimsical person. I found myself being like, okay, this I feel like we could have toned things down. But then at the same time, we also have one of the main conflicts for Delilah is she feels like people don't take her seriously. And that she says, I recognize that people view me as a manic pixie dream girl, and I don't want them to view me that way. I want them to take me seriously. And I was like, okay, yes, give me more of that. It just felt like the character of showing Delilah as this whimsical person was kind of taken to like level 10. She's constantly falling. In the first like 100 pages, I think she trips and falls onto Jackson 3 times. She's constantly spilling things. She, instead of going and sitting on the couch, she throws herself over the side of it. Everything was just kind of taken up to the next level. And it wasn't until the last 100 pages when we got to get to know her on a more deep level. And I felt like if we would have had this depth from the very beginning, and if we would have toned down some of those stereotypes of the manic pixie dream girl or the whimsical character, then I would have been with her the whole time because I love whimsy. I think it's fun to be girly and fun to be like silly and goofy. But it just felt like, okay, like here we go again. She's falling again. She's talking about how she's clumsy again. So it's really hard to connect with her. I also felt like the relationship kind of came out of nowhere. And then it also wasn't really a relationship. It was kind of very murky. What we have these like two people who are annoyed by each other, but Jackson's starting to find Delilah charming and Delilah finds him attractive the whole time. And then he gets really anxious before broadcast and she kisses him. then he begs her to kiss him the next time they get ready for a broadcast. And it felt very like, oh, okay. All right. And so they're having these feelings, they're having these intense like conversations about each other, but they're never really like clarifying what they are. They're never clarifying what they feel. And so Delilah is extremely torn up because she doesn't know, Jackson just views me as a phase, as something fun to get him out of his routine in the mountains. But once we leave, he's going to forget about me. And Jackson's not really doing anything to disprove that. And they don't have like a real conversation for a long time. Even when they get back, she's continuing to feel this way. It just felt like I didn't have that same level of like buildup and connection with the relationship. All of a sudden, they just were like obsessed with each other. And now, my final critique, we have our main antagonist, which is Keith. And Keith is Delilah's boss at the station that she works at. Keith is just basically a walking HR violation. Like, Keith hates Delilah, openly hates her. Everyone at the station knows that he hates her. He is doing things to like flat out embarrass her. He is calling her a good time girl. He's, giving her assignments that are meant to be degrading. Everyone knows it. And nothing is done. The motivation we get for like why Keith hates Delilah so much is because she's just too darn likable. Everyone likes her too much. And then Delilah ends up quitting her job because of how horrible he is, which, good for you, girl. And we have this plan for her to get back to her job. And she talks to the station owner, I believe, and tells her about what Keith has been doing. And within like 3 paragraphs, the station owner's like, yeah, I think it's time for him to go. And I'm thinking, why didn't we do this like at the very beginning? If this would have been so simple, why haven't we done this? Why didn't we do this on page 5? And then everything is all well and good and everything's all hunky-dory. And I guess that's my main critique of the book, is it didn't feel as organic. The chemistry didn't feel as organic. The conflicts didn't feel as organic. The characters didn't feel as organic. Everything kind of felt like it was a step up and was maybe kind of falling more into tropification than into those like natural, easy human characters. And when they were being more human, that's when I loved them. That's when I was like, yes, I connect with these people. When we see Delilah dealing with her grandpa's health and his Alzheimer's diagnosis, and when we see Jackson dealing with this complicated feelings about his mom and her desire to be involved with their family and with his sisters who he has custody of, I was like, yes, 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 this is so good. This is so charming. But it felt like it wasn't that way the entire time. Overall, like I said, I gave this 3.75 stars. I enjoyed this book, but it took me until the last like 100 pages to really feel it. And I wish that the charm in the last 100 pages that really grabbed me would have been present from page 1. But those are just my thoughts. And we all know that I am the queen of unpopular opinions. So let me know what your thoughts are on And Now Back to You by B.K. Borison. Will I read the next book in the series? Yes, 100%. But unfortunately, this one fell into the sequel curse for me. Now, back to you.